Good morning, church. Welcome to today's devotion. In today's devotion, we'll take a look at Genesis chapter 24, verses 12 to 22. And in that portion of scripture, we see that we find a woman at a well, and her name is Rebecca. Now, in that passage, we see that Abraham sends a servant to find a wife for his son Isaac, and he sends him with 10 camels and some more gifts, and he's supposed to go to his brother's town and find a wife for his son. So this servant goes to the town of Nahor, and over there on the way he asks the Lord to guide him, and he says that if there is a maiden who can give him water and water his flock, that he would take that as a sign from God that this is the one for Isaac. So as the servant is approaching the town of Nahor in Mesopotamia, we see that Abraham's brother's granddaughter is arriving at the time when the shepherds are there, and she comes to the servant's rescue by filling their feeding trough of the camels and watering the camels and giving him also water. And here we see an example of a woman who's just serving others and making herself available for the work of the Lord. And she doesn't know that if her good work will get her any reward or anything. But one day a guy shows up out of nowhere searching for her, and she would be the future wife of Isaac. Now here we see Rebecca, and Rebecca, she is a woman who's made herself available. She's taking the gallons of water over her head and watering the camel's trough. And she has to do this several times because every camel takes a couple of gallons, and 10 camels would take around 300 gallons, and she would have to carry around 8-10 gallons in one go. So imagine she's going, the text tells us that the troughs were at a little distance, so she has been running forward and backward, and she is putting effort into serving others. And this is Rebecca for you, and she is emptying out her vessel every time in the trough, and she has to do this a couple of times. So here we see a person not knowing if ever she's going to be paid or repaid for her kindness, but she's just going at it. And here we see that the servant of Abraham comes, and this is the one that he's been looking for, a lady of virtue. And we see that and many times in our life we are doing things for the Lord and nothing is happening, but that's okay, because serving the Lord and giving everything towards him keeps us humble and also keeps us as a servant for the Lord. And here we see the example of Rebecca. Now we see that that the encounter between the servant and Rebecca is not a chance, is not by accident, okay? Because we know in Psalms 37 verse 23 it says that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delight in his way. And also we see that in Isaiah 65 verse 24 it says that when my people pray, I will have already answered that prayer beforehand, and I'll be only listening when they are speaking. So here we see that when the servant went out to get the bride for Isaac, his prayer was already answered, and it was answered in Rebecca. Now there's a very famous story told about a couple who went for a conference, and they couldn't find a housing, or they couldn't find a hotel room to stay a certain night. And And they enter a town, and because there was a conference going on, we see that, there was no hotel room available in a certain hotel. But the clerk, said, I hate to see such a good couple go out in the rain. I hate to send you guys away. So here we see that, a man doesn't know what he's going to do with this couple, but he wants to help them anyway. So he says that you can have my room and just pay the normal room fare the next day. So next day when they were checking out, the couple says that, someday I will build you a hotel to be the manager of. This couple goes back to New York and several years later builds a hotel and calls this clerk up and says that I want you to be the manager of my hotel. Now, this hotel was situated on 5th and 34th Street, and this hotel was built by William Walter Astor, and it was the famous Waldorf Astoria hotel, and it had 15 guest rooms and 450 hotel rooms for the guests privately. So here we see that, this man was rewarded for what he himself was very surprised. This man's name was George Bold. So like Rebecca, this guy had made himself available to serving others, and he was humble and like a servant, just taking care of the needs of others. So this is our devotion for today.